Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am super excited to have you here with us along with John and listen to John talk about how to succeed in Google Discover. Right? Me and John have been chatting, going back and forth. I think for the last 3 months, right, discussing ideas on how can we help publishers do better in general, right? Irrespective of COVID, non-COVID, right? Quick introduction. I am Vivek Khandelwal. I'm a founder and COO at Izuto. Izuto, the company which is hosting this, along with John, uh, is an audience engagement platform. We help publishers drive more engagement using push notifications, right? And we have John today to unpack everything that there is about Google Discover. John needs literally no introduction. John has been doing this for 2 decades, right? That is literally my internet age, right? Right. But yes, John, why don't you start with a quick introduction of yourself, right? And then we'll go from there.
Thanks, Vivek, and thanks to Isoto for hosting this webinar. I have been working on the slides for almost like 2 months now, so I hope you guys like it. I really, when I meant in the title, everything you should know, I packed a lot of information. I think I have 40 very packed slides, so let's go over this. My name is John Shahada. I'm a VP of Audience Development and Strategy at Condé Nast. I oversee SEO, social media, and email operation and strategy and podcasts. If you're not familiar with Condé Nast, these are the brands, some of the brands that we have. I'm also the founder of News Dash or Newsy Dash. This is like a tool I started 5 years ago. It tracks Google News and news top stories in real time or near real time as much as possible and provide publishers with a lot of insights. This is our recent dashboard. It's available for everyone. If you're a publisher in the news industry, check it out. It's newsdash.com/elections 2020. So this is like a live search tracker of all election results in Google. Okay, enough about this. Okay, today we're going to talk about Google Discover. And I work in so many publications and I meet with so many SEOs and so many publishers. And it has been the one topic that keep coming over and over and over and over. So Vivek and I said, okay, let's put this together in a good presentation and talk about everything. Can you really optimize for Google Discover, right? Or let's start, what is Google Discover? Where can you see it? And so on. So now Google Discover is an AI-driven content recommendation tool introduced by Google a few years ago. And I think the name changed to Google Discover maybe a couple of years ago. Google Discover focuses on relevant and engaging content. And I want you to underline these two words, relevant and engaging, because we're going to keep coming to these two words over and over and over. Google Discover content feed includes a lot of information, but it includes news and evergreen, includes images, videos, AMP stories. It appears in Google mobile homepage. It appears in Google app, in iPhone. It's also available in multiple languages, highly personalized. And we're going to talk about how personalized it is. Users can follow topics, places, businesses, entities, and so on. Another word I want you to remember is Google is a social feed, right? Google is your search Facebook feed. And this is important, and we're going to come back to this. Okay, now Google is different from search. As you all know, this is nothing new, right? In search, you have a keyword, and this keyword will determine what results you will get. In Google, Google Discover, there is no query, it's queryless, right? And it matches users' interests, and usually most of the Discover content is based on newly published content. I want to do something with formatting. Give me a second, guys. Something happened here with formatting. This is the problem when you do updates the last minute before the presentation. Okay, good. Okay. I think now we're in a good shape. Yes. Okay. Can you guys still see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, good. Okay. So it's recently published content, but it's not only new content. A lot of times there's older content as well. And this is mainly completely automated based on AI and machine learning and based on user interests and also evolving using user interests. And I'm gonna explain evolving in a second. Discover doesn't limit rankings to what's published most recently, which means like top stories or Google News, it's very recent, within 24 to 72 hours. Google Discover, sometimes you can see stuff from like 3 months ago and so on. Okay, personalization. So it's highly personalized, right? It takes in consideration your search history, web history, apps history, browser history, what type of device you're using, what type of interests and topics you follow or implicitly interested in, your location history, right? If Google is tracking your location history through Google Maps or your device allows Google to track it, then Google understands that you travel from here to there, or if you enter your home address or work address, Google understands that this is home and this is work. Also, if it's allowed to track your current location, it will give you recommendations based on that as well. This is a screenshot on the right-hand side. I live in Berkeley Heights in New Jersey. I never entered my address anywhere, but the tracking is enabled and it understands that, and it understands that I get a lot of stories from Tab Into, which is a local publisher. So it's providing these kind of stories here. So Discover gives users more or less on every story. You can say, I want more of this or less of this. Also, you can block any topic or interest. So if you click the 3 dots next to each story, you will get this card appears and it says, hey, you can hide the story. You're no longer interested in the topic that they identified, Berkeley Heights, or you're not interested from the source, which is Tab Into. Okay, this is something from Google blog, and I'm gonna read it to you in full because it's very important to understand what are topics. When we talk about interests or topics, this is a top layer that may include hundreds and thousands of entities and keywords and so on, right? We have taken our existing knowledge graph, which understands connections between people, places, things, and facts about them, and added new layer on top of this, right, called topic layer, engineered to deeply understand the topic space, how interest can develop over time as familiarity and expertise grow. The topic layer is built by analyzing all the content that exists on the web for a given topic and develops hundreds and thousands of subtopics, right? So if you're interested in the royal family in UK, it means under that you're interested in Prince Harry, Meghan Merkel, Prince Charles, you're interested in all these Queen Elizabeth, right? So a topic and subtopics, right? For these subtopics, we can identify the most relevant articles and videos, the ones that have shown themselves to be evergreen and continually useful. So underline evergreen and useful, as well as fresh content. So Google is telling us 3 things here: fresh content, evergreen, useful. We then look at patterns to understand how these subtopics relate to each other. So it's similar to the knowledge graph, so we can more intelligently surface the type of content you might want to explore next. So by understanding the topic layer and subtopics, if you're interested in one of these subtopics, then they start determining, are you interested in other subtopics under the same topic layer? Now, when you talk about topics or entities, I have been talking about entities for almost 7 or 8 years. If you look at the top keywords ranking every year in Google Digest, right? These are the top keywords for the year 2020 and so on. And with BERT and with all the Google algorithm change, you know that topics is a very major concept now in SEO. And when we talk about topics or entities, let me say, right? You're talking about 4 or 5 things. You're talking about people, easy to know, right? Places, events, organizations, right? Concepts, right? Concepts is something new. And topics, Google reports, I can't remember the exact number, but I think 15% of all new of all searches are new searches. So topics and entities are new every day. There is a lot of new topics that come in. iPhone 13 was not an entity, right? A year ago, but now it's an entity, right? A Galaxy Pencil, and so on, right? So there are new topics that come every day and new entities. Now, these are some of the supported schemas, right, that Google highlighted on their site. So there's, and I linked each one to the schema.org, books, book series, education, events, and so on, right? So this is some of the stuff that you may understand as entities. If you're optimizing for news, you need to keep entities in your head. It's important because this is the majority of people who search, they search using entities and qualifiers, right? Entities, it means Donald Trump. A qualifier will mean, for example, Twitter, Joe Biden rally, right? And so on. So there's always an entity and then a qualifier, what they are specifically searching for. So entities must be present in headlines, must be present throughout the story. And it's not about, I think John Mueller the other day was talking about, someone was asking him about, oh, should we reach a certain word count, right? It's not about word count. It's how comprehensive your article is. And a part of being comprehensive is talking about these related entities in the article, right? I always give this example, how to boil an egg. If you're talking about how to boil an egg, most likely you're talking about easy recipes and you're talking about breakfast and eggshells and so on, right? These are all connected together. So when you're writing an article, right, in news about a specific entity, what are the related entities at that time, especially around news? So if Michelle Obama is speaking at the DNC, yes, Barack Obama is connected, but at that given moment of time, it's the DNC, the most related entity. It's Michelle Obama's speech. It's other speakers at DNC, right? So related entities are very important in your body of article to show comprehensiveness of the article. Okay, why you should care. I'm not gonna talk why you should care because most likely you guys see already the numbers in your Google Search Console. And it's amazing to see, like, for example, in India and in Europe, I have seen some publishers that get 90% of their organic clicks in Google Search Console through Discover, right? So it's such a like a fire hose of traffic for some publishers. In US, I have seen up to 60%, anywhere from 15 to 60%. Now, my theory is countries with Android heavy consumption or phones have a very high penetration of Google Discover. Also, I have found like certain topics like sports, like in US, publishers that are focused on sports have a very high Discover traffic, right? So it reaches drastically from 15 all the way to 90%. I also see, like, if you look at your Google Discover, you will see that the average CTR in Google Discover is almost 7-fold as your other keywords, right? So this is one of the very top publishers out there for a certain period of time, and you see that their 8 million clicks that they got through Discover, it has an 8.6% CTR. Yes, the impressions are lower, but it's a very high CTR, right? So due to images and the way it's presented and so on. Okay, now I also have a theory. I could be wrong, but I believe Google Discover also shows up in SERPs, in search engine results pages. Now, remember we spoke about entities and interests and so on, right? Now, have you ever seen interesting finds? I think I have a screen here, interesting finds, right? This one here, right? And a lot of times, I think 70% of the results now have interesting finds. My theory is interesting finds are part of Google Discover, right? I don't understand how is it triggered, why it appears in a certain ways, how it appears and so on. But my theory, it's a part of Google Discover. Another thing also, I have seen interesting finds. There were some users on Twitter reporting that interesting finds start to show up on some knowledge panels, especially around businesses or around certain entities, right? Which also gives a signal, like what I mentioned before, that Google Discover and entities and topics and so on are extremely connected. So you see it here, it only shows up in mobile. When click interesting finds, you will go to a page that looks extremely similar in design and layout as Google Discover. It doesn't have certain elements in it, but on that page, you will see subtopics on the top here, right? So I was searching for Google Discover, I clicked it, and then I have subtopics, clicked one of them, and then it's all like very similar to Google Discover, and you can follow these topics. So that's my theory. I don't have any confirmation from anyone from Google, but I believe Google Discover is making its way in SERP somehow based on all the personalization we mentioned. And in a recent study, they found 70% of all the queries that a person analyzed had interesting finds block in SERPs. Okay, now, it's very important. It drives a ton of traffic, but a word of caution. Don't get addicted to Google Discover traffic, okay? I think August 10 gives a very clear sign that Google Discover traffic is not reliable or it's not sustainable, right? Don't depend. This is like when you invest in stock market, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, right? You diversify your portfolio. So if Google Discover is like your main focus now, yes, it drives you a ton of traffic. This can change tomorrow for so many reasons, right? It's a supplemental traffic, and this is what Google keeps stressing lately, supplemental traffic. Now, as Google Discover gets more popular, more content gets added to Google Discover, it gets cluttered, you get less chances of getting into it. Also, I'm gonna speak about EAT soon, but remember it's a social feed, right? So if you work in social media, like I've been working on SEO for 20 years, social media for maybe 12 years or so. In 2018, so when Facebook first came out, right, it started sending traffic to publishers like crazy, to the point that Facebook was almost the same or more than Google traffic. I remember these days, right? Like everyone was crazy about Facebook. And then in 2018, they changed their algorithm. They wanted to focus on meaningful interaction and engagement. So they turned the knob down. And overnight, publishers lost 50, 60% of their traffic, right? So what this means when with social feeds that has no queries, right? The vendor keeps focusing on a certain metrics that are important for them. Engagement, CTR, meaningful interactions, and so on, right? And I mentioned this before, Google mentioned engagement a lot of times, or engaging, right? So that's why Discover traffic is not reliable traffic, right? But still, we're gonna talk about some ways to optimize, some ways to uncover certain secrets of Google Discover. Okay, before we talk about optimization, I want to talk to you guys about the prerequisite, how to get in Google Discover, right? The very first important thing, which is like no-brainer, you must be indexed in Google, right? If you're not indexed in Google, you will not show up in Google Discover. So that's a given. You must adhere to Google content policies. Now, Google Discover has its own separate page for content policies. And I'm gonna talk about this a little bit later, but you have to adhere to these content policies. You must have high resolution images, and I'm gonna talk about this. Your articles must have clear dates, bylines, information about the author, and the site must include information about your publication, your as a publisher, your company, your network, how to contact you, and so on. And for the most part, it should be timely content. Okay, so we're gonna dig deeper into this, but I wanna tell you this is the prerequisite. If you're not indexed, if you don't have big images, if you violate Google Discover content policies, there's very little chance that you get in Google Discover. Okay, observe Google content policies, right? This is very important. I put the page there. This is Google Discover content policies. And when you go over it, it's almost word to word as Google News policies, right? All these types of content are not allowed, adult themes, copyrighted, dangerous content, deceptive practices, and you can click the link and understand what each one means. Manipulated media is very interesting as well, because manipulated media, it's an image, right, that's very enticing to click, and it gives you the assumption that this person or this celebrity is doing something that is shocking. But in reality, that person didn't, right? So it gives you a certain perception that is different from what happened. So manipulated media, this is something I'm digging more and more into. I saw some examples of some sites where all their images are like, they're taken from multiple images put together and so on, and they have lost a lot of traffic recently. I don't know if it's because of this or not. One more thing also is I saw that the very first the second line, civics information, this is a new line that is not included in Google News, right? It has to be fresh, authoritative content on voting and election process from authority sites. So this one line that is not in Google, included in Google News content policies. Okay, the big question now, can you optimize for Google Discover? Coming strictly from Google mouth, right? John Mueller, their own blog sites and so on, they said, you may create and optimize content to fulfill specific search need for search engine traffic, but there is no way to create content that explicitly target discoverers' interest matching. And I absolutely agree with that. But there are certain best practices you can do to increase your chances of getting more of the Discover traffic. Also remember, Google Discover is highly personalized, which means that I can argue that no two users will get the same exact feed. But you can focus, instead of focusing on individual users' interest matching, you start building a persona for your Google Discover audience. This is here, we use machine learning. We take all Google Discover URLs in Google Search Console, and then we get all the entities for each of these articles and use machine learning to cluster these entities together, and then we come up with this, right? So it seems that the most of the traffic is coming through face masks, recipes, Zodiac, Trump, Taylor Swift, and so on. If you understand the entities from the articles that drive most of the traffic to your site from Google Discover, you really understand the audience of Google Discover, right? So this is very important, and I'm gonna talk more about this as well. You need to understand your Google Discover audience and their broad interests. This is a key to optimize for Google Discover. Okay, so I'm gonna share with you 7 things that you need to do to optimize for Google Discover. 1, deliver quality content. It's like the first line in every SEO presentation, quality content, right? So what do we mean here? Having content that is timely is a key, right? Someone is asking what's the percentage of the content that is timely versus like evergreen. I'm gonna get to this shortly. It tells the story well, and it provides unique insights. This is a word, unique insights, that is mentioned in Google Top Stories, in Google News, and in Google Discover. Similar wording, which means that Google appreciate diversity in a covering, right? So if everyone covering a certain angle about a certain incident that's happening, if you can discover a different angle or a different insights to the same incident, Google appreciate that kind of diversity to provide their users, right? So this is something to think about. Don't just cover it like there's millions of other publishers just covered what happened. Can you cover it from a different angle, a different opinion, and so on, right? Capitalize on topics that drive Google Discover traffic to your site, which what we discussed in the audience interests by analyzing audience interest. Create interesting, engaging content. Again, engaging. I keep underlining this word because think of Google Discover as a social feed. And I have a very interesting analysis I did at the end of this presentation that even highlight engaging a little bit more. While the majority of content in Google Discover is timely, newsy, trendy, we still see evergreen. Now, the majority of the content, the biggest majority, I think maybe 2/3 or more, no, I think even more than that, maybe 18, I can't remember the exact number. I think I have it later in the slide, but the majority of the content is timely content, right? Between 1 and 3 days. But we still see content that have been like 2 months old, 3 months old, but the majority, the highest majority is timely content between 1 and 3 days. Think about, when you think about evergreen, think about like useful. You remember the word useful I mentioned before? Like how-tos, for example, right? Travel, new hobbies, shopping, etc., right? Make sure that your evergreen content is refreshed often. So when you have a guide, right? And this is the same strategy you do for Google search, right? And this is something we have been doing in Content-esque for a while. Track your evergreen content and see when it drops in traffic, right? In my opinion, a good piece of evergreen content lasts anywhere from 9 to 12 months before it starts losing its strength, right? So track your evergreen content and refresh them often and frequently. Google Discover, Google News, top stories, appreciate diversity of angles. I mentioned this. Having page titles, so this is coming from Google directly, right? They're asking you to have a title that captures the essence of the content, right? So it goes back again to news SEO optimization, descriptive, not vague, right? Straightforward. They are big on non-clickbait headlines, right? And it's the same kind of like practices that Facebook had about a year and a half ago for clickbait and engagement bait. So if you work in social media, you will get a lot of these concepts. Avoid tactics that artificially inflate engagement by using misleading details in preview content. For example, the images, right? The image give you a certain impression that is misleading. The snippet, right? Or the description, the title, to increase appeal and so on. Avoid tactics that manipulate appeal by creating a morbid curiosity to any shocking whatever that you need to know before you die, or stuff like this. Like make it interesting and enticing to click, but don't make it morbid or like, you know, outrageous kind of thing. Content that is timely or current interest tells a story well. Unique insights again. Okay. So this is a study done by Abby Hamilton. It's a great study. I added the link here. She analyzed, I think, 11,000 URLs in her portfolio from across different sites, and she saw that 46% coming from news sites, 44% commerce, and so on. Again, it depends on the sites her agency or she is working on, right? If I'm analyzing my portfolio, all my portfolio is all like newsy sites, right? So take all these numbers, right, with that in consideration. So she found that 46 like news organizations have a very high penetration in Google Discover, which absolutely makes sense. Now, she found that even though that news had only 46% of the content in Google Discover, 99% of the clicks came from news sites, right? So the majority of clicks from Google Discover going to publishers and news sites. It's a great study. I added the link there. It's a great article. At the end of the presentation, I added 5 articles that you should read to know more about Google Discover. So great content, timely, diverse. Don't do engagement bait, don't do link bait. Two, include high quality visuals. I cannot stress how important this is, right? Large images, at least 1200 pixels, enabled by max image preview large setting, using AMP, avoid using the site logo as your image, no brainer. Avoid manipulated media, 16:9 aspect ratio here image for your articles, works really, really well. Have a descriptive file, like the traditional SEO stuff, you know. So images and visuals are very important. Three, mobile and AMP. So AMP is not a prerequisite for Discover, but I analyzed maybe 10,000 Discover results in Discover feeds, and I found that 60% or more, this is not scientific, this is like me just going over and over and over many feeds, and I found at least 2/3, if not more, of all the feed content that is recommended by Google Discover is AMP. So I would say AMP increases your chances of appearing in Google Discover, but it's not a prerequisite. And it's no brainer, Google Discover is on mobile devices and only appears on mobile devices, that you should absolutely be mobile friendly. So another thing also to look at, so this is, if you go to Google Search Console, select, go to Discover Performance, and then select Discover Appearances, and look at these three numbers. You have your total clicks for Discover, you have your AMP articles, and you have your videos. And you subtract, you see that your non-AMP articles are a very, very small fraction. So 89% of all the clicks that came to this site came through AMP articles, right? So AMP is very important. It's not a prerequisite, but absolutely helps with Google Discover. Now, 4, in June or July 2020, Google added this paragraph to Google Discover. Our automated system surface content and discover from sites that have many individual pages, a lot of pages, demonstrate expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, AAT. Those looking to improve AAT can consider some of the same questions we encourage site owners to consider for search. So it's very the same thing, especially if you're working about your money, your life kind of content, medical content, health content, financial content. I even see it sometimes in fitness and so on, right? So how you can improve your AAT. First, I would recommend you follow Lily Ray. She is an expert on EAT, right? This is an article she wrote on Path Interactive, the agency she's working at, and it gives you some information about AAT. But for you, very quickly, I want to mention 4 or 5 things that you should absolutely focus on. One, you absolutely have a secure site, right? Articles must have dates, bylines, and information about the authors. A small bio about the author as well. The site must absolutely have information about us page. What is the publication's editor-in-chief? Who are the authors in the company? What's the physical address? How a user can contact the publications? This is the same exact things that you have for Google News. About me page, right? So every author should they have their page, short bios on the article about the author, and link to author social media. If you look at the about author page, linking from the article, like the author name to about me page, mention every kind of information that can help raise the AAT. I'm going to use the word score for this, right? So their experiences, their awards, what association they're affiliated with, any accomplishments, do they have books on Amazon, anything that really like give the trust of users to this author. Also use a person schema and about the author page. This is person schema, is like the email, the image, the title, all the information you feel comfortable. I wouldn't say put your birthday there, but all the information that you feel comfortable and connect to other social platforms. Now, I'm gonna mention something that is not mentioned anywhere else, but I believe it's very important. I believe there is buzz factor, right, in Google Discover. Google keep mentioning engaging. So I did analysis of Google Discover traffic, the articles that Google Discover, and 15 other metrics. And I did that study in January this year, and I did it again in September. And the one striking thing that I noticed is Twitter interactions of these articles, the correlation is 0.95, 0.91. In general, correlation, anything above 0.8, or sometimes people say 0.9, is a very high indication. There is a very strong correlation there because the maximum value you can get to 1, right? So that tells me this site is in US, analyzed thousands of pages, right, across a long period of times, and it keeps coming back. Twitter interactions have the highest correlation to Google Discover traffic. I'm not saying Twitter and Discover, but I believe Google is looking on some kind of metric that provides engagement or buzz around content that they display and discover. Now, you take this and say, hey, John, I live in Germany, or I live in another country where Twitter is very small, right? It wouldn't be influencing Discover in any way. I believe that's why I call it a buzz factor. It's not about Twitter. It's about something, some source in your country, in your place, that is influencing the buzz. So start looking in your country, what are the most popular social platforms? Start doing some correlation studies, happy to help, and see if there is a specific platform that are highly correlated. I'm not saying this is causation, but I'm saying that content that users interact and engage well with, especially on Twitter, really performs well in Google Discover. So this is something to keep in mind. Another thing also I found in January, engage minute on the site has a very high correlation as well, right? So, but I didn't see it in June. So actually it went down all the way down. So something to keep in mind there. So buzz factors, right? Monitor social engagement of your content, focusing on the content that is most engaging. Also focus on trending topics, right? We keep talking about timely and usually trending topics do very well in social, especially breaking news or something really important. Monitor time and site bounce rate, optimize social buttons on your mobile site and apps, right? There's earned and owned social. So you wanna help your own social efforts by having a really sticky social buttons on your mobile apps. Another thing also, Google Discover started like giving this people also view. So I believe buzz and popularity work together in a certain way. So popularity, right? The concept of popularity. So that's why I keep talking about trends. You can use Google Trends, you can use Twitter Trends, whatever. In News Dash, we have our own trends tool. It's free for everyone. You can see all the related entities. I spoke about entities. So if Miami Dolphins are trending, these are all the entities are trending around Miami Dolphins, because it's all about these kind of connections that you need to mention in your article. Also, there is a correlation between what's trending and what's coming in Discover. So for this topic, which I took out of the screenshot, is like it was trending exactly on 9/17, and the Google Discover came a high spike on 9/17. So there is a correlation between what's trending and the interest out there from the people that Google will highlight. We're almost coming to an end. Get your knowledge panel. If you're a business, an entity, a brand, make sure you get your knowledge panel. This is information from Google. Again, knowledge panels or entities have a follow button, then users can follow, and this is an explicit signal to Google that I care about this entity, I care about this business, right? And then they start getting more information from them. And finally, going back to the very first slide, uncover your Google Discover audience interest. If you go to your phone in Google Discover settings, you will see Google's telling you, here's the information we collected about you, right? John, you interested in stock market, Drupal, refinancing, MySQL, used cars, and so on, right? So you cannot get access to the user information, right? But if you do what I told you in the beginning, collect the Google Discover articles, run NLP on top of these articles. Google has a free NLP tool up to 5,000 calls a month for free. Collect these entities, cluster them, and understand your Google, right? Also, you can understand, like if you go to Google Discover, a lot of times they give them headers, right? It's like, hey, machine learning, would you be interested in this, right? Skincare, machine learning, coding. So all of these are entities, a lot of signals that you may find. So I took this article that show up in my Google Discover feed. I click the three dots and it says, hey, are you no longer interested in coronavirus disease? Are you no longer interested in Anthony Fauci? Are you no longer interested in Politico as a source? I went to the article, I got the article content, I went to Google NLP, I put it there, and you will see like it's showing that New Jersey is an entity there. I live in New Jersey, that's another thing. Anthony Fauci is the most important entity. It's a person. COVID, it's very strong entity. So you can collect all that information, cluster them, and understand the personas, the interest graph of the audience that come from Google Discover to your site, and keep doing this. You can do this if you have tags on your site. I did this in like 20 minutes, collected all the tags from all the articles that drove traffic, did some Excel magic very quickly, and very easily I can tell that these 5, right, are the top tags on our site. This is how I identified it. I don't like to use like editorial tags. I rather use NLP and entities and so on. But these are like, when we write about news or politics or Trump or coronavirus, we're really good high traffic from Google Discover, right? Versus like we keep writing about Hollywood. This is the number of articles, right? The most number of articles we write, but our Google Discover is not as high as this. You can do the same analysis by section and so on. Now, finally, most of the traffic coming from Google Discover will last for like a day or so. There are some instances where the traffic lasts for a month or sometimes more, but this is very rare. Most of the traffic will last for 1 day spike. You can track Google Discover by like looking at your Google APIs. John Mueller said not all Google Discovered is identified in Google Analytics. That was like from 2019, so I'm not sure if it's still valid or not. Most of the hacks I saw for tracking Google Discover and Google Analytics are not perfect, but this is a good one, right? Remember, Google Search Console reports on clicks. Google Analytics report in sessions, right? So 2 different things, 2 different metrics, so you cannot use them. This is a great article and slides. I have the slides later that tells you there are identifiers for every segment in Google Discover that tells you what is this part in Google Discover. So this is personalized but broad topics. This is evergreen content. This is, and so on. So this is a great list of all that information. It's included. This is John saying we will not be expanding the Google Discover and Google Search Console data further than what we have right now, and saying that the Google Analytics doesn't have everything yet. And final slide, this is just the beginning. I think Google Discover will go further and further. More visuals, AMP stories are coming here now. So there's a couple of tools that you can use. AMP stories quickly and easy. There's a couple of plugins for WordPress. So utilize all the different aspects or different channels to reformat your content in different ways, right? Podcast just appearing a couple of days ago. I believe ads will be coming to Discover for sure. Evergreen content is getting more and more in Google Discover. Some users even said that they saw Reddit comments in Google Discover, and this goes back to the whole idea of buzz. Google is looking at certain platforms. I have seen, or it has been reported on Twitter, there's short videos coming in Google Discover, more or less like TikTok and many more. So this is some 5 or 6 articles that I encourage you to read with way more details. But that's it. That's everything I know about Google Discover. So I hope you guys liked it.
John, that was incredible, right? That was, there was so much you have unpacked in today's presentation. It is absolutely amazing. You know what? We have a ton of questions today.
Okay.
Guys, we already have about 12 questions right now in the chat. Feel free to sort of just put down everything again in the Q&A section. Okay, John, I'll just sort of keep on throwing you uh, the questions right in no particular order. Right.
Sure.
So let's go with Nishu Chaudhary. Nishu is asking, does Google Discover traffic come under Google APIs.com and organic search? Is there any chance to get Google Discover traffic in GA in terms of users, page views, while the Search Console only indicates clicks and impressions?
Um, I'm sorry. I'm trying to read the question as well. Does Google Discover traffic come under Google APIs.com? The majority of it does, but I have seen cases that it's not under Google APIs. That's again what I'm saying is GA is not perfect for tracking. It gives you directional insights, but it's sometimes there's Google Discover traffic that's not accounted in GA. GA reports in terms of sessions, visits, right? So multiple clicks on the same visit is counted as one. Google Search Console reporting clicks, so two different metrics. Just pay attention to this.
All right, let's pick up the next question from Brenda. Uh, the publishers have seen a drop. You mentioned that publishers have seen a drop in Discover traffic. Can you explain a bit more about that as well?
Yeah, so the most popular one is August 10. A lot of publishers in US, UK, and overseas reported this. And the interesting part, or the sad part, it completely died. It's not like for a lot of publishers I spoke with, it went from like 100 to 0, right? So I don't know exactly why. A lot of people say this might be connected to the glitch of the Google indexing glitch that happened around the same time, but that glitch was fixed within few hours. Google Discover never came back. A lot of people asked John Mueller, he never gave any comment about it. It could be related to a new algorithm in Google Discover, right? It could be related to EAT. I believe AAT is playing a bigger, has a bigger weight now in Google Discover than it used to be before. I believe also that there's more and more content now in Google Discover than had been before, but it wouldn't take the traffic from 100 to a 0. So it feels like it's more like either a glitch or I don't want to use the word penalty, but you don't go to a 0 unless something really massive. Really something is wrong. If it dropped, that's okay. But if it goes to 0, then something is absolutely going on.
All right, John. John, the next question: how is a news site defined now? Sites that are approved by Google as news providers is no longer the case, right? So, what is the definition of a news site now?
I think with what happened with fake news, right? One of the interesting things in the past, the news block in Google used to say top news, and then after the whole fake news thing, they changed it to top stories, right? That was interesting. But with fake news, Google and other search engines are becoming more and more stricter into what they consider to be newsworthy and highlight for the users. And add on top of this AAT as well, right? Your life, your money, right? So news organizations, I would say the first step is you need to appear in Google News, which became harder and harder since Google removed the submission forms for Google News and said, this is gonna be automated. So I have seen people complaining for like a year now, hey, we submitted, we got approved, and we still can't see our content in Google News. You need an actual brand presence. People know about your brand. You will see a lot of the big names are the ones that are ranking better, right? When it comes to news and breaking news and so on. So, but you still, there's new publishers are coming. I have seen a lot of startups here and there. You need to focus on a specific topic and its subtopics. You cannot be about everything. And your site cannot be just a section news and then everything else. Google wants a site that's completely news to be featured in Google News and completely focus on specific topics. I remember Google News, Google in the past said we might be looking at offline metrics to define news trustworthy. I think Facebook said that. So there is a different ways, but I think it's becoming more and more harder to be considered a trusty news source for top stories, Google News, and so on.
Thanks, John. That was really helpful. I do have one question which we got an email from a publisher. The question was, does republishing still work? And should I be doing it more often?
It depends what's your definition of republishing, right? Because it can be understood in so many different ways, right? If you're just taking the same content, changing the timestamp, and just like slapping a couple of words here and changing the headline, that will not work. And Google will understand that you're doing this, and they're gonna take measures against your site. If by republishing, it means you're really updating the content, right? Which means like, hey, there's new information, there's new knowledge, there is more stuff that is important and good that I can add to this article to keep it relevant, and then updating the timestamp and headline and making sure you optimize your SEO, it absolutely works. We do this process all the time, anywhere from 9 to 12 months for big articles, and frequently during the year if there's any new information that has been surfaced on the topic that we're covering. And we've seen time after time results that sometimes 100, 200, 300% increase in traffic when we do this. But if you do it the right way, right, for the right reasons, not just like manipulating the titles, headlines, and timestamps and call it a refresh.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. Next question from Andrea Miller. I know we are running short of time right now. Where do you find the audience interest data for your site? Or is that the graph for the entire web? And if so, how do you find that? I would love to see some examples of audience interest mapped to articles in Discover if possible.
So you have to do it, right? I created this, and there is two ways to do this, right? One is you take all your articles that are ranking in Google Discover every day or whatever, or like once a month, and Google Search Console will give you the top 1,000. Then you take each article, you go to Google NLP, right? Natural language processing, register for an API key, and then have some developer or some tool does this for you. And then you can collect all the entities about each of these articles. Then you collect these entities in an Excel or Google Sheets and cluster the entities together based on the clicks you got from the articles. And then you will get something very similar to this, right? Or you do the poor man's way. It was like, okay, I have my own tags and so on, but I don't trust your own tags. You shouldn't trust your own editorial or open form tags. And let me understand a little bit more about which sections or which tags I use to understand. But I would go to Google NLP, do this process, and then that will give you a clear understanding about the entities that your users engage with on the content on your site.
John, they could just use your product, which is news-.com. Right?
Yeah, news-.com, we give you the entities around the trends that are trending right now. So that helps you at the moment of writing the article, right? Soon, we will create a tool that does this analysis for Google Discover traffic to give you the entity graph, but this is not, it's coming soon. So let's say maybe 3-4 months, where you can connect your Google Search Console, and then we'll give you, hey, based on the articles that are ranking last month, these are the entities that really work for your site. But this is not soon, but thank you for the mention.
Got it, perfect, okay. So that's done. Okay. I have a question from Victor. Can you explain more about the correlation between Twitter interactions and Google Discover? Interesting.
Okay. So causation versus correlation, right? Correlation doesn't mean causation, right? So this is a very important concept to understand. But every time I analyze maybe 15 or 16 metrics that I have in Parsley or wherever you have access to, against the articles that driving the top traffic from Google Discover, Twitter interactions always come number 1 or 2, right? Which tells me the content that is engaging on Twitter really works in Google Discover, right? Or Google Discover looks into other platforms to determine social buzz or engagement, or both, right? So again, it's not causation, it's correlation, but Twitter interactions in US really important. I remember there was a tweet, some guy, that was like 6 or 7 months ago, he said he played around with Twitter to inflate interactions around a certain article, and he saw the article popping in Google Discover. I don't know the validity of that test on how it was done, but I have seen other people talking about this as well, social interactions or Twitter interactions.
Got it. Perfect. Okay, let's pick up this question from Nicolas. What is the proportion between news and evergreen static content in Discover? News versus static content, the proportion, yeah.
Yeah, the majority of the content since Google Discover started is news, and it's coming from publishers. But recently, I have seen more and more evergreen content, especially with the user behavior, evolving user behavior. So I'm looking for a car for the past month or so. I start seeing more car recommendations, best practices, how to get a lease, how to find the best cars, and so on. So this is all evergreen because my user behavior and interests are evolving around a certain topic. So it approached that, but I have seen, but the majority of the traffic still goes to news articles, and the majority of the content still timely content.
Got it. We have a very interesting question from Chandan Kumar, who says, when picking up the visuals, if the same image which is displayed on 2 articles, same topic on 2 different articles, right? How will that work in Discover? For example, the same image of a politician on 2 different articles, does that influence it in a positive way or a negative way? Do we have any idea about that?
I know that in Google News, for example, if you use unique images, back then, long time ago in Google web search, Google used to have an image that links to one source and the article links to another source. And they would select the image based on the best image out there. So if everyone using the same image, you don't have any advantage. But if you're using a different image, better quality or whatever, sometimes that will pop up. I don't know within the context of Google Discover how it is. It will need some deep analysis of all the different images, but I haven't seen a lot of, like, it's all like faces. It's all of people, right? Except like when it's products and so on. But I can't answer this question, a good answer that will give you absolute correct answers, but I would use a different image. I would use something that not everyone else is using.
Got it. No, I think that sort of answers the question itself, right? Okay. We have a bunch of...
Test with it. You have to test, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't have concrete information how will this impact the article. So test.
Perfect, John. Thank you so much for that. I know we're already out of time right now, but John, I will sort of request you to take 2 questions more with me. We have Sean, who has asked about, do you feel Google Trends is a useful tool to identify Google Discover topics?
So absolutely, right? So there's a lot of trends tools out there. I'm doing a trends session, an online news association in next year. I also did multiple trends sessions this year. There's a lot of them. I identified maybe 15 tools out there. Google Trends is amazing, daily and real time. Also, if you look at Google News trends, if you look at Google shopping trends, if you look at Twitter trends, there's a lot of sources. The problem is, like, do you have the resources and the time to go over all these resources, collect the trends and so on? So you can use our free tool, Newsy-Dash or newsdash.com. It's free. You can see all the trends and you can see where it started because we track it all the time. But absolutely, Google Trends is a really good tool to look at.
Got it. Perfect. Okay. we have a lot of questions. Some of them have already been answered in the presentation itself. So we will share the recording with you guys. We will sort of try to make sure that we index the recording so that you can get specific answers. John, one last question for you, and this question is it's from an anonymous attendee.
Okay.
Do you have any idea how Google quantifies each, or how does one's content, uh, how one content's each is higher than another?
So Google keeps saying that there is no such a thing as score, right, for AAT, right? So I would say read about what Lily wrote. Look at the stuff that I added into my presentation about things that you need to do to increase your EAT weight, if we would say that word for your authors, but there is no way to measure EAT for one article or one source against another
Got it. Okay. All right, John. I'm going to be respectful of your time here. We have a bunch of questions, but what we try to do, folks, is we will try to get these questions answered from John either ways over email. Might take some more time, but we can only do so much in an hour. And thank you so much for being patient and for sticking around so far. You guys have been a wonderful audience. John, of course, has been an incredible speaker, sharing with us absolute knowledge bombs. John, thank you so much for taking the time.
one. Thanks, Vivek. I truly appreciate you guys hosting this
John,
webinar.
by the way, what is the best way of reaching out to you?
Um,
Yeah, I
Twitter.
was saying the best way to reach out to you.
Oh,
Yeah.
Twitter or LinkedIn. I answer LinkedIn as well. I just want to thank everyone. A lot of people are asking about the entities. Use Google NLP to each of your articles. This is the easiest way, but it will require some development. Um, I will try to put something together and maybe write something about it. But I want to thank you, Vivek. I want to thank Izoto for hosting this webinar. Thank you, guys, and looking forward to connect further with you after this webinar. Thank you.
All right, John. Thank you so much. Have fun, guys. Have fun. Have a great weekend. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. Cheers.